What happens when two dudes, one a retired Navy SEAL commander in Colorado Springs, and the other a hippie meditation teacher in New York City, get together to discuss living mindfully? That's a great question, because we don't know what will happen either. Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with co-hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Each week, we take an authentic dive into how mindfulness continually impacts our lives, deepens our relationships, and allows us to be emotionally alive. We filter all of our conversations through the man box, where we unpack how as men we are expected to act in society, how fighting the authentic human experience is exhausting and damaging, and how mindfulness can help. Now, on to the show.
Oh, I just lost my light. It's got the motion sensor covered. Hey, John McCaskill here. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness, which is unapologetic, and now my background's falling on me even better. Hey, John McCaskill here in Colorado Springs. My brother from another mother, Will Schneider, there in New York City. We are so excited for you to be here with us today. We've got a great guest, Dan Nevins. I'm going to go ahead and bring him up on stage. I'll tell you a little bit about Dan, and then we're going to get into the show. Welcome, Dan. Good to see you, brother.
It's great to see you, John, and great to see you, Will. Happy to be here.
Thanks. Yeah, so we are so excited to have you, brother. So for the audience, Dan is a professional speaker who has been inspiring audiences around the world with his message of perseverance, resiliency, and hope for more than a decade. Dan is a highly decorated soldier. Dan was severely injured during combat in Iraq in 2004 after an IED, an improvised explosive device, detonated beneath his vehicle. He lost both legs below the knee and lives with a traumatic brain injury and the emotional wounds of war. But Dan discovered the life-changing power of yoga, which has enabled him to heal from the invisible wounds of war in a way that nothing else could. He quickly realized that other wounded warriors could benefit from yoga in the same way and knew he had to become an instructor. We're so excited again, Dan, to have you on the show. We're going to get more into that story, unpack that. How did you get into it? And what changed your mind about what you felt yoga was. But prior to that, Will, my brother, again from another mother, is going to lead us off with a grounding practice.
All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome, Dan, to the show. So excited to have you here, hear from you in a moment. Thank you, John, for being here. Thank everybody in the audience that will be making comments today. We still have time. Invite your friends. Tell them to come in to our show because we're live here on what? We're on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. Just amazing.
Yep.
So great. So thanks again for everyone being here. Let's start with our grounding practice. Maybe take a different seat today. Maybe do a little something different with your hands if you've been doing this with us for a while and practicing for a while. If you're listening on podcast, stop what you're doing. This is only going to take a few minutes, and we're going to get ourselves grounded with some breathing. I can use it if you can hear it in my voice. So, all right, I'm rushing again, John. So let's just take a step back. Find your seat, ground yourself, guys. And a very easy way to ground yourselves is make contact. Make contact with your feet on the floor. Make contact maybe with your hands and your thighs, or interlace your fingers together. Close your eyes if you're in a safe place, or if that's safe for you to do so. And let's just start with a nice exhale out the mouth. Just release any tension that might be in your throat, your jaw, or your shoulders, and take a big giant breath into the nose. And let's take a nice exhale out the mouth again. Yeah, give some sigh on that exhale, which will help just to kind of relax some of that tension in face, jaw, shoulders, and throat. And again, big breath in. Sigh it out. Good, more breath. Let that go. So we'll do one more of those. Bigger breath if you can. Fill a bigger balloon from the bottom of your pelvis into the side, back in front of your ribs, top of the chest, all the way up into the brain. And let that go out. Let's just take that breath, keeping it nice, full, rich, and satisfying. just in and out through the nose. We really expand with more breath, right? We bring more breath in the body, and we really help to drop that breath down into our pelvis and expanding a part of our respiratory system called the diaphragm. And really taking those big breaths to send signals all the way up through this, what's called the vagus nerve, all the way up into the base reptilian, most basic function part of our brain. And it sends a gentle signal just to relax. So let's keep working for big inhales and vary on the exhale, very smooth and rhythmic exhales, nice and easy. Let's just keep working like this for the next few moments. As you breathe, if you feel any tension in your face or your third eye, you like that brow, the space between on your brow, relax that, relax your jaw. See if you can take that relaxation as you find more of that natural quality of exhalation or within the exhalation and the breathing. See if you can help relax the shoulders. And really all this mindfulness stuff we talk about, I like to think of mindfulness as the adverb. The adverb of how you're doing things. Yes, we're breathing, but can you breathe with a quality of peace or a quality of relaxation or quality of joy? Just a couple more moments here. Take a moment, just remind yourself why you're here today. Why are you tuning in today? Good. Let's just finish with one big cleansing breath. Exhale out to begin. Empty all the way out. So you can hit the bottom. Empty, empty, empty. Out, 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 out. Take a big giant inhale. And exhale, let it go. Awesome. And you're ready to open your eyes. And let's get this party started, gentlemen. Yeah.
Right on. We could have planned that.
Right?
That's right. My brother-in-law tuned in a couple weeks ago when Will and I were doing the grounding practice, and he said he was going to text me because he's like, "Oh my gosh, John has fallen asleep on LinkedIn Live." But hey, that's how we kick off every show. Yeah. Again, Dan, super excited to have you with us, and for the audience, I met Dan just via phone probably a month ago, and he told me his story of how he came to yoga, and it just gave me chills. And I was like, all right, we've got to get you on this show. So Dan, I would love for you to just, run through a quick summary of how you got to where you are today, brother. And then we'll get into some questions and comments and everything else.
Absolutely. Yes. So I guess I was born. No, I'm not going to start.
We're going way back.
Yeah, way back. I guess the story, the yoga story, really starts when I was wounded, when I was blown up in combat in Iraq, and headed out for a 72-hour dismounted counterinsurgent operation as part of Task Force Tacoma, which sounds maybe kind of fancy for those non-military people listening. However, I was in a National Guard unit. I did 8 years active duty and was deployed from the California Army National Guard. And it's an understatement to say that we were not ready to be fighting a war. I mean, that is a complete understatement. And though the power of goals is kind of significant, right? And in our case, learning to become at least an efficient combat fighting force, that being the goal, because that's not where we started. That being the goal, the consequence of not meeting that goal is that your best friends die. Oh. And the amount of human transformation potential in those moments is just awe-inspiring. And I watched this group of people that I affectionately called the Beverly Hillbillies And I say that because, well, it's a quick story. I say that because when we first rolled in, like start stage in Kuwait, and we're rolling in like through Baghdad up to where we went to this place called Balad, where LSA Anaconda was. That was our sort of home station. We left, and there was these really great war fighting units poised on the border. They had all the best weapon systems and the high speed trucks, and we had these flat green carc painted Humvees with no roofs or windows. Like we had like plywood for the roof, and we had desert camouflage uniforms and woodland camouflage, everything else. I mean, it was bad. And I swear I heard banjos play as we rolled in. And then so once we got there, and we realized we were unprepared. We started to get better weapons as time went on, and better equipment as time went on. But in that growing process, there was a lot of lessons learned. We lost people. And those are the toughest lessons. But as time went on, we got better and better at our jobs. And then, I had the privilege of being a leader in our organization, and it was a lot of work to get there, but we did it. And so the Battle of Fallujah started on November 7th of 2004. I was there during all of 2004. However, I was not in Fallujah. But it was, a very chaotic time in theater, and we got this mission. Some of the insurgency was leaving Fallujah to come attack LSA Anaconda, so we wanted to meet the enemy where they were. Headed out for that mission. Boom. Ground erupted underneath my vehicle, sent my 18,000-pound vehicle about 6 feet in the air in a ball of fire. And I don't really remember everything about that explosion other than I knew something was happening. And I realized I might have been knocked out for a couple seconds when I woke up, or when I opened my eyes. I realized I was ejected from the vehicle, and my legs were still caught in the twisted and burning metal that used to be the floorboard and undercarriage of the truck. Dude. And I said, it was pitch black outside, 4:00 in the morning, low hanging cloud cover. You can't see the stars, can't see the moon, but I could start to see a little bit more now because there was some lingering fire from the blast that started to engulf my vehicle. And I just remember the first thing I saw was my weapons stuck in the door frame of my vehicle. And I was saying to myself, Dan, get up, put your weapon into operation. Dan, get up, put your weapon into operation. And I just couldn't move. And I kind of laid back and listened to my team move with tactical proficiency, securing the perimeter, doing everything they're supposed to do. And then I kind of took a pause and a breath. I remember distinctly taking a deep breath. And I looked forward to the driver's compartment of the vehicle, and my good friend, one of my mentors, Sergeant First Class Mike Annalini, who happened to be driving it, was really painfully obvious he made the ultimate sacrifice. And I saw the condition that he was in, and which was terrible. And I just knew that I was hurt pretty bad. And then I just remember going to work on myself. I started with my helmet, came apart in 2 pieces in my hand, and I was like, well, that's not a great start, but I'm conscious, and that's good. And then I realized, like everything in the government, that helmet was made by the lowest bidder. So it could have just been a defect. I don't know. But I checked myself, my arms, my torso. When I reached up for my legs, that's when I felt it. The unmistakable arterial blood spurt with every beat of my heart. Mm. What happened was 255 millimeter artillery shells were rigged in an improvised explosive that we hit a pressure switch. Those 2155 rounds blew up right underneath of Mike and my legs, right? So that's like where the blast went off, and 2 giant pieces of shrapnel tore through my thigh on both sides. I don't know how it missed the moneymaker here. I don't know how I missed that. But like I tried to recreate it a million times. That was like divine intervention. I don't know, but I was unscathed on my upper body, but my leg was torn almost in half. I had like an inch of flesh holding the top and the bottom of my thigh, and 2 giant slices going through both sides that punched holes through the ceiling in my M1114 up armored Humvee. But I didn't really know that was happening in the moment. All I had realized was that my femoral artery was cut, and I had to just like stop the bleeding. And I just remember reaching my hand in the wound, like almost up to my wrist. I thought I was going to be like MacGyver and just like pinch the artery and be like, I'm going to run through and it's going to be fine. Like, good. That's not how it goes down, though, right? Yeah. And I just reached my hand in there and pressed against the shrapnel. It was still stuck in my femur. And I prayed for my medic to arrive, and thankfully I blinked my eyes, my medic was there. And I had a tourniquet on my leg. One of my team leaders putting an IV in my arm. And then it's like I blinked again, and my whole team, my family was right there putting themselves in harm's way to remove my legs from that vehicle that was still on fire. And then I was in a stretcher, then in a helicopter, and my 45-second helicopter flight right back to the main gates of LSA Anaconda where the Combat Surgical Hospital was. And I remember going into, I guess, surgery. So I went into, like, I came off the helicopter, and I remember doctor stuck happy juice in my IV, and I was out. And I woke up, I don't know how many hours later, several hours later, in the recovery room, actually the recovery area of the really nice tent that they call a hospital tent, right? Allegedly sterile, I guess, right? And I remember this combat nurse's face right in mine. And I'll never know her name, but I'll never forget her face. She said, "Sergeant Nevins, you're a very lucky man. We managed to repair your femoral artery. We had to take your left leg below the knee. We managed to save your right one for now, but you'll probably lose that one too." In that moment, like the pity party started to set in. I was like, well, how is my wife going to love me anymore? Like, I was a competitive runner. Running is what we did together, right? Like, that was our thing. I sort of defined myself as like an adventure athlete. If there was ever a new sport or new something to do that was like kind of risky and dangerous, I was like the first one to like sign up, right? And that like every way that I defined myself as a man it was like crumbling away in front of me. And it hit me pretty hard. But in that, I'm so grateful for my team, because I just took another breath and I looked against the wall of the tent, and there was my whole team just waiting for me to wake up. And it's like I shrugged off the pity party, and they came over and told horribly offensive jokes. I mean, so bad, so good though, so good and nurturing and enriching. And for those of you military, non-military people listening, the way that a lot of military men show love for each other is by completely dismantling their manhood and ego, and like trying to really go after the most sensitive areas of our being. Like, that's how we show love. So if you have a military person around you that's making fun of you all the time, like, they love you. If one around you all the time just treats you with respect and professionalism, you need to work on that relationship. So true story. At least in my experience. I don't want to speak for everyone. And so in those moments, we kind of had a moment together. We talked about Mike, who I actually wear this bracelet for every day. Pretty common in our communities. It says Sergeant First Class Michael C. Adelini, Task Force Tacoma, 10 November 2004, Balad, Iraq, where we were. And I wear this as a memorial for my buddy Mike, to remember him. And really, I wear it for two pretty important reasons, other than just remembering Mike. Because Mike was the hardest working human being I've ever met in my life, just period. And I could tell a whole story about who he was, and you would get it too. But I'll just claim that he's the hardest working human being I ever met in my life, and I mean it. And so this bracelet reminds me to work hard. Like, if there's a goal, like, you can have a goal without hard work is just a wish, and wishes really don't do anything for anyone. Especially doesn't keep people alive on the battlefield. So this reminds me, if I have something that I want to do, I better be willing to commit to all the hard work it takes to make it real. And this reminds me to live, not just be alive, right? But to be the author of my life. Who is it that I want to be, and what do I want to be up to as a man, as a leader, as a dad, as a partner? Like, who do I want to be, and just make the right decisions every day that sort of lead me down that path, versus being in response to everything else happening in my life. So I'm grateful for this reminder. It's terrible how it had to happen, but this is one of the most powerful tools that I have in my life to stay present and keep moving forward. But after I realized how bad Mike was hurt, how bad off I was, that was just like the beginning of the story. So finally went to Walter. Well, I got to stop at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, where I'd spend 7 days. Surgery twice a day at least, trying to wash out my wounds. Like I was like full of all sorts of crazy infections from the nature of like where I was actually physically wounded and exposed to all these things. And like I said, the Battle of Fallujah was going on. I was not in Fallujah, but the Battle of Fallujah was in that hospital with me. I mean, it was full of combat wounded, mostly Marines. Most of them worse off than I was, and most of them 18 and 19 years old. And I just remember those moments in and out of consciousness, just hearing all of the chaos and panic and trauma. And it's the worst parts of war is seeing like that, like the backside of it. Because when you're in the adrenaline of the fight and those things are happening, that's just what's happening. And then you take a pause. You're in safety, or relative safety. And then the gravity of like what's actually happening in those battle spaces and the real results of that is like around you. It's pretty powerful. And got my ride to Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I spent 2 years there, 30 some different surgeries, mostly trying to save my right leg. And I remember being at Walter Reed. And I also had a mild to moderate traumatic brain injury, which gets better every day. And so I don't remember all of, especially the early parts, but what I do remember was the first time somebody came into my room and said, "Hey," and one leg's gone, the other leg's up in traction. I was so grateful to be met by Wounded Warrior Project at my hospital bedside, and they did a great service for me with who they were and getting me reconnected. But there was a mental health professional that came in, but she was a nurse that worked in the mental health team. And she was like, "Hey, we do yoga downstairs." And I was like, "You can," no. Like, I was, well, one, I'm a dude. I'm spandex. I don't have a man bun. No.
I'm putting mine up.
I would if I could. I just can't. So I'm just going to hate on it, right? Because I can't do it. But those moments, right, I was just like, yeah, that was a hard no and never gave it a second thought. Now you fast forward almost 10 years later, man, like 9 years later. And, I had successfully rehabilitated. I got my prosthetic legs, climbing mountains, riding bikes. Like I just found like physical activity was my go-to coping tool, right? So, PTSD is very prevalent among the warfighter community. A lot of times it's acknowledged and treated, and a lot of times it's not acknowledged and not treated. And I was on that not acknowledged, not treated side. I guess technically I still am, because I don't have PTSD, because PTSD is a diagnosis that a doc has to write down in a chart somewhere. And now you have it. So I've never seen a doctor that would have the ability to write that diagnosis. And then so I've never had it. But would I have gotten that diagnosis? Fuck yeah, for sure. Yeah. Right? Like all day. But I was fortunate because I never suffered really. Because as soon as the kind of signs, like the whether it's depression or whether it's like negative thoughts or intrusive thoughts or sort of reliving certain experiences, and when that stuff would happen, I knew, very fortunately, there's something I needed to do about it. I didn't want to stay in that space, so I'd ride a bike, climb a mountain, play golf, run, do something, and it worked. And then you fast forward, years later, and all is good in my life. Like everything's managed, under control. I'm, well adjusted and successful in my job, and I had to have another surgery on my right leg. What happens is, like the skin on your leg, because it used to have a really big, strong calf muscle, like powerful diesel, huge calf muscle, powerful thighs that could just crush skulls, right? Whatever. Very masculine, manly legs that I have. But what happens is, they cut it and they form like what your residual limb or stump or nub or whatever you want to call it. And then that shrinks over time because you can't work out that calf. And then so the skin gets all weird, and it kind of needed to get a little facelift on my nub. It was actually medically necessary, nothing cosmetic about it. But I had to take leave from work. So I had to take the Family Medical Leave Act to go back to go home, to go to Walter Reed, to have my surgery again, and then come back and rehab alone. When I got wounded, I had a 10-year-old daughter. And it was actually because of her, really, that I feel like I stayed alive. Because in those moments when I was laying there losing what seemed like all of my blood in this miserable place on the planet, you know how they say when you're about to die, your life flashes before your eyes? You guys heard that before, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
But that wasn't my experience. My experience was more like letting go, like saying goodbye to things that I haven't done yet, if that makes sense. And I can't even really recall what they were. It's just that was the quality of the thoughts that I was having. But the last one is the one I remember. It was my 10-year-old daughter, but she was all grown up and dressed in white head to toe, and then walking down the aisle without her dad. And that was the one I just shot up. And that's when I went to work on myself, trying to like stop the bleeding and do all that. Because before that, I was just giving up and just letting it happen. Like I was in that, I don't know if it was shock or if it was what it was, but I just wasn't even, I was just kind of laying there, just allowing what was happening to happen. So now here I am years later, my 10-year-old is 18 and she had joined the Army herself, and she's gone now, and she's at Fort Gordon for AIT for her advanced training. And my marriage was a casualty of the war, so we were living apart. We shared a 3-year-old daughter too at the time, so I couldn't take care of her running up and down steps on one prosthetic leg and crutches while my other leg healed. And so I was home alone. And because of the Family Medical Leave Act, when you take leave, I'm not allowed to answer emails or send emails or talk to any of my team. I had a big team, and those were like, yeah, they were my colleagues at work, and that was my team, but they were also every friend I had in the world. And so I couldn't call my friends. I couldn't lead my team. I couldn't see my daughter. I couldn't take care of my other daughter. And then the brain and the mind just started churning, and all the old things would come up, and the intrusive thoughts and the beginnings of depression, and all these things were happening, and I couldn't sleep at night. And then when I did go to sleep, I'd wake up with nightmares, and I couldn't do it. I was taking like handfuls of Benadryl and then chasing it down with a few gulps of whiskey, just hoping I could get to sleep and maybe not wake up in the morning. And not from like a suicidal perspective. Like I did not want to end my life, but I just didn't want to live it either. And those moments, I was just in the worst place I had been in my life from a mental health perspective. And so I knew it was the first time 22 veterans a day take their own life, or whatever the actual number is now with all the adjusted data, way too many. And I never understood it. Like I didn't get the mindset of someone doing that until those moments. Because I was fortunate, because I knew in 8 weeks, there was this light at the end of the tunnel. 8 weeks, I was going to get my leg back. And I was going to be able to run. I was going to be able to walk. I was going to be able to do all the things I did to cope. And I was going to resume that and be good. So I was able to hang in there. But if I didn't have the light at the end of the tunnel, and I had been in that mindset for a year or more, I'd probably be one of the 22. And because it wasn't worth it. Like life didn't seem worth living. And I knew I needed to talk to somebody, but I didn't want to call like Wounded Warrior Project or another military charity that's out there doing good, because I thought they'd overreact and maybe send me to some underground treatment facility in Tibet or something. So I just called a friend and I told her my whole story, and I'm like snot and tears. It's all of it, guys. Like just like I'm a wreck, sharing things about my story that I'd never shared before, like things seen, done, hurt, like all of it. And this friend of mine happened to be a yoga teacher. She'd been teaching for maybe a year. So I knew her before she was a weirdo yoga teacher. So we were still
under the bus. Put yourself under the bus too.
Right. Yeah, right. No, but that's I'm channeling who I was then, right? Right. And so she just listens to me like a good friend does. And then when I was finished, she was like, Dan, you need some yoga in your life. And I was like, that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. I was so mad. I was so mad because how dare you take this serious problem I'm having right now and like gripping with like my sanity almost, and you're going to suggest yoga? Like, okay. Like, it's like, it felt like, oh yeah, my leg is cut off and here's a Band-Aid. You know, that didn't seem like the right fit for me. And I was such a hard no. I mean, so many curse words, so much hate coming out, backlash to her kind, generous offering. But she knew not to push it further anymore. So she said, "What about meditation?" And I had tried to meditate before. I read about it in business journals, and because meditation was real, yoga was weird, right?
When is this, Dan? You can tell us, give us a time frame here. When is this? What year?
This is 2012.
Okay.
Right. So the Harvard study was out with the, meditation increases gray matter in the brain. Like all those things were real. Steve Jobs had it in his book that he meditated, and it's how he came up with all these great ideas. So I didn't have it right. I thought meditation was about being completely vacant, empty. And then, so she was like, okay, hey, maybe you're not doing it right. So she taught me how to sit and be present to everything. And that was a game changer. So I started meditating twice a day, every day, 20 minutes a day, twice a day. And things just got better. I could sleep at night. It wasn't like, it wasn't fully 100% better, but it was definitely statistically significantly better as far as sleep quality, general mood, like all of it. And so I went back to work. I got my leg back, went back to work, and life was good. I felt like I was taking better care of my body as a result. For some reason, like I didn't say like, oh, I gained a bunch of weight, I need to go eat better. I began just to eat better.
Yeah.
Because I was more, I guess, in tune or in touch with like.
It happened to me. Same thing. Same thing happened to me. Just naturally started to take over, like subconsciously. But yeah. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I made the mistake. I called my friend Anna and I said, thank you. And, thank you for like introducing me to this practice. I'm going to keep doing it. And by the way, I've never missed a day of meditation since. If I wake up 5 minutes late or if I wake up late for something, which has not happened in a long time, thank you, Jesus. If I wake up late for something, I'm just going to be at least 5 minutes more late.
Wow.
I'm going to be more late, just period. It's a non-negotiable. So when I called her to say thank you, and she did what any good friend would do. Oh, so this weird hippie BS yoga stuff worked for you, huh? And I was like, oh yeah, like, I don't want to admit when I'm wrong, but I will, right? And so I was like, I'm wrong, you're right. So she was like, well, you owe me some yoga. And I couldn't get out of it. So I committed, like John said earlier, 3 private lessons. Private, not with weird yoga people in the room. Private. I was like, no one can see me do this. Like, we're not going to tell anybody, but I will appease you because you're my friend. And I just remember, so I went to, I'm an all or nothing type guy. So I went to Lululemon, refinanced my house, bought a pair of shirts. I was like, what is this? I bought a yoga mat. I'm like, oh my God, my man card ripped itself up. I walked into a yoga studio. Instantly, my genitalia fell off and I walked. That's what it felt like. That didn't happen, but it felt like that's where I was in my head. And I just remember too, and I'm like, why is it so hot in here? 1, this is stupid. And then I'm still in pain, right? So I'm wearing my prosthetic leg. It still hurts. And it's kind of getting bloody in there and stuff, that I can feel that happening. And she's teaching me how to stand, like about Tadasana, and talking about like all asanas are a variation of Tadasana. And I'm listening, I'm trying to, but like, when are you going to start making sense? And she's teaching me, poses and, and I'm struggling, like, because my right leg is really hurting, and because I want to learn the warrior poses, because right, that's where we want to start.
Warrior.
Warrior. There's a warrior pose in yoga. I didn't even know.
Bring my testicles back.
Know chicks could be warriors. It's not true. This is like a mentality. So people are back there now. They're in the comments. He said this one time. No, I don't need it. So, and I'm doing and I'm unstable. So because I'm on prosthetic legs and I'm still in pain. So all my poses, and I'm kind of like rocking and moving. She's saying these stupid things like root down to rise up. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, what are you, right? What does that mean? And I'm like, can you speak English? And I'm just like trying not to die. And I can't, and she's giving me these cues and I can't get my body to do it. And I'm feeling smaller and smaller because I'm not used to not being good at stuff. And like now I'm here, I was resisted doing this so much. And now here I am, I'm doing it and it's kicking my ass, right? And I am like not feeling good about it. And, I remember one time I was particularly, and I'm getting like, I'm channeling my inner sort of ghetto. Like I grew up in Baltimore in the kind of like in the hood. And so like, I was like, my inner hoodness was coming out. Because she was like, I was particularly unstable in a warrior pose. And she was like, press your feet into the earth. And I was like, bitch, say feet one more time. Say feet one more time. Watch what happens. It was so, I was just this angry, adolescent feeling youth, right? However old I was, 40. I was 40 years old. And 39 or 40, I was old, right? And so here I am, I'm struggling. Finally, the class is over. I'm driving home. I'm like, check the box. I did it. Never have to do that again. Yoga is not for me. I was right. And so I get home, my phone rings, it's Anna, and she's calling to schedule the next lesson. And then right when I was about to tell her exactly where to put that next yoga lesson, I remembered that I committed to 3, and a commitment's a commitment. And so I scheduled it for like weeks out because I didn't want to go, but I knew I had to. And I went again, and I'd love to say, oh, it was perfect. And then the world, nope, it sucked. And it was still hot. I was still in pain, even though I gave myself a couple more weeks to recover. And I'm still sweating, and she's still saying root down to rise up, and I'm still confused, and I'm still not having it. And I got so mad at like just the situation. Like I was coming unraveled a little bit. I got so mad. I said, can I just do this with my legs off? And her eyes were saying, no way, dude. Like, what am I going to tell you to do with your feet? Like, I don't know. I'm a newer yoga teacher. Like, I don't know.
Closet, it's like, I mean,
no one taught me how to teach a guy with no legs, right? Like,
wow.
But her mouth said, let's do it. And so I just remember I kind of took my legs off. I sat down. I threw them to the side. I was just like anger. I got my yoga blocks, which felt like crutches. It felt like an assisted device, right? So I had this block and a strap. I'm like, I don't need this shit. Like all of that is happening. And she's standing behind me, probably wondering, what am I going to tell him to do with his feet now? Like, she's probably just sort of assessing the situation. I'm trying to put myself in her shoes as a yoga teacher. Like, what am I going to do? But in my head, I had already figured it out. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do that warrior one pose that we've been working on. And I'm just going to figure it out. And I'm an all or nothing type of guy. So I just like tried to call on, like, what is the stuff she's saying? Root down to rise up. What does that mean? Mm. And I felt so small because I'm just on my knees on a yoga mat and my 5'4" yoga teacher's towering over me. And I just like, but like nobody got to see me with my legs off. Like that was like, I made a joke about it earlier, but that was the best part of my body. Like I could put, 40 pounds on my back and run 26 miles. I was never like really big dude, but like my legs could get shit done for me. I could run fast, I could run far. And when they were gone, like I had to deal with that, but I got prosthetic legs and I covered all that up. Kids thought they were cool, like I didn't have to show anyone what used to be and how it shriveled up and atrophied and scars everywhere and like the whole body image sort of things come into play with that. But now here I was like showing this new person what was left of my legs, and I didn't even care in that moment. Like the shame, I was so sort of angry about it, the shame just kind of slid under the radar. And I just remember I'm on my knees and I'm going to figure out, okay, got to get my hips sort of in line and my right foot forward, left, foot back, but I'm on my knees and okay, what does root down to rise up mean? And so I just visualized, right? So I tapped into like my sports background. Like, okay, how do I visualize that? So I just imagined roots, like giant live oak tree roots rooting down out of what was left of my legs into the earth and then rise up, right? So in warrior one, your arms go over your head. And then so in that moment, and I have to throw in a disclaimer here, is like I'm a dude. I shoot guns, I eat meat. I am very conscientious of where my meat comes from today, right? All those things, but I'm still a dude, and especially if you rewind time then, I'm as dude as they get. And I didn't resonate with like hippie granola cruncher tree hugger, even though I love granola, really love being like, I totally have hippie vibes. I will hug a tree. I just don't talk about it, right? I just don't with that. Right. And it's because it comes from like this place in my like youth of like, that's not who I am. Right. And so I say that to say in that moment, the earth sent this jolt of electricity, this powerful surge of energy up from those roots into my body. My arms flew over my head and it lit me up from the inside out like nothing has ever done for me. I mean, I went from feeling the smallest I've ever felt to feeling like the most powerful version of myself that's ever been. And I can't even describe it, but it's not a metaphor and it's not an exaggeration. Like I was on fire in the best possible way with this energy that just lit me up. And like tears are flowing out of my eye. I'm not crying. Tears are flowing out of my face. And I'm having this breakthrough moment in my whole life. And poor Anna's like behind me. No idea this is happening. Probably still wondering what to tell me to do with my feet. And I was so like, I'm like, it was like the earth was saying, Dan, where have you been for the last 10 years?
Wow.
Just floating above it on your prosthetics, disconnected from the thing that connects all of us. Ground, the earth that we all see, no matter where we are on the planet, all beings connected to this physical structure, this powerful energetic structure. And I was hooked. I needed to learn every pose. I needed to learn how to transition every pose. I couldn't wait for my next lesson. And by the end of that third lesson, I was enrolled in teacher training. I was like, I got to do this. It's like I found the cure to cancer, but the cancer in this case is like the invisible wounds of war, right? Yeah. The stuff that we carry that a lot of people don't talk about. And sort of like I didn't even have to talk about it. It's like it went to work. Like, there's my teacher, a guy named Baron Baptiste, who said like, you don't do the pose does you. Right. And that's like, I was like, holy shit. Like that's what was happening to me. And that was it. So I knew that I had to like learn to teach so I could be the guy to try. It doesn't work all the time, but to try to make yoga less weird for people like me.
Dude, I don't even know what to say, man. I told you, Will, I told you, yeah. And I'm pretty sure you would get chills listening to his story, man. I probably got chills 6 times, 7 times just listening to that, man.
Filled up on that last part with root to rise when you finally found what it was, what it meant. Wow. Mm-hmm. It's Dan, that was incredible. Can I, would you mind if I go back and
please
pick apart a couple things you talked about? Yeah. Which I think are really important, is you talked a couple times about higher purpose. Realizing your daughter, when you were like she was 10, and you're like, and all of a sudden you attach to something a little bit bigger. You mentioned something about 9 years later you had that whole that thing again. It was like you're isolated, you're alone, but there was something that was connecting you to a deeper meaning and purpose. Mm-hmm. And that's what kind of got you through more of those dark times. And I just wanted to bring that up because like I feel yeah, or a lot of us seemingly, we talked about, 22 veterans die every day of suicide. And I think it's important to recognize what you're talking about here. It's like when we are connected to something greater than ourselves, that can really help us pull through those dark times, like you just talked about. I mean, and like the worst kind of situation. I mean, you lost, like, I mean, I didn't want to think about what my life would be without my legs, because I love my feet. Like, I really love my feet. Like, they really do a lot for me, but thank you for sharing so much of that story. And here you are as a yoga teacher, Dan. And how has that been for you as a teacher? Like, as your journey as a teacher, and then what was it like being? Was there a moment as a teacher, like, being taken seriously because of your prosthetics? You know what I mean? Like,
it was a struggle because, well, one, I thought I had to, like, I'm going to teach warriors and everyone else is going to fuck it up and I'm going to get it right. So, and that's where I sort of like started. And then I realized, after doing that for a while, I realized, well, it wasn't a dude warrior that taught me yoga. It was a chick who'd never even seen a military uniform. And I'm like, then I sort of had to let go of my attachment of, like, I have to be the one. And then I started teaching all people, and I had like this. I'm trying to think of the right words for it, and it wasn't about like not being good enough. Like, from my perspective, it's like, well, I'm not good enough for that opportunity. But I was getting opportunities to teach yoga on really big stages and really big platforms, like Yoga Journal conferences and Quandary List and like all these things. And I had been teaching for like a year. I'm like, I think I'm a pretty good yoga teacher, but I'm like, I think something about this has to do with I'm the only yoga teacher without legs, right? Like, without missing both legs. And so, so it felt a little bit like a novelty, like a dog and pony sort of show. And that didn't feel good. But then I said, like, well, fuck it. And I got something to say. I have some real evidence as lived in my life that this isn't just poses on a mat. Like, this is real connection, like human empowerment stuff we're talking about. And I get to share the story. And I might forget the whole left side in a series or something, or I might get the point-to-point cues wrong. But I tell you, I fucking mean it. Like, I mean it. Like, when I'm teaching yoga, I mean it. Oh, so fucking much. I say fuck a bunch of times. I'm sorry.
Unapologetic, man.
So much, right? And so I'm like, I'm gonna take these opportunities, and I'm gonna use it. Like, build a platform to actually start talking about these things and maybe reaching other people. And then I realized the real power is teaching all people. Right. Because, I started teaching yoga to help warriors heal from the invisible wounds of war. The reality is, in the world, is like, we're all living with the invisible wounds of some war, whether it's a body image, addiction, the way you were brought up, where you live, sexual assault, abuse, like, you name it. We're all living with the consequence of some war that we fought. Right. And you talked about it a little earlier, Will, like, there's a crisis of purpose in this country. And it's a real crisis. And when people don't have purpose, it shows up and I'm not trying to make anything political here, but it shows up in rioting. It shows up in, like, hate. Like, one group, when a group can't see eye to eye with another group and they become enemies of each other because there's no real communication and no dialogue and people don't want to hear it, and then call it mainstream media, call it whatever you want, there's sources intervening to keep people separated. Right. We're missing, like, a unified purpose that people can latch onto and sort of let go of the petty things that actually don't make a difference in the world. Right. And don't add value to anything. Be a stand for justice, be a stand for what you believe in, but not in a way that tears something apart. Because if you really had purpose in your life, that wouldn't be what's happening.
Right. What would you say, Dan, to men and women that are listening out there that have heard about yoga, maybe dabbled a little bit, or have those same feelings of it. It's a weird thing. It's only a bunch of weirdos are doing it, or it's like I hear a lot of men say it's kind of a woman thing, or I can't do yoga because I can't touch my toes, or it's just stretching. Right. What would you say to people out there that have these? Like you went from literally like a denier, an advocate to a constant teacher, right? An enthusiast, obviously. So what would you say to people out there listening that have what I just talked about?
Yeah, reservations, absolutely. Well, there's the easy one, which is like, well, I can't touch my toes or I can't bend over, so I don't want to go to yoga. That's like saying, well, I'm too dirty to take a bath.
Dude, I'd love to hear your response.
I can't clean up now, right? No, it's like that's an easy one. But for everything else, I'm like, well, just try it. Like, it's like, all right, so go. Period. Just do it. Like in anything, nothing happens without action, right? So take the action of doing it. You can like deliberate all day long in your head and you're not going to be anywhere new or anything different. The only way, if something's not working, because most people, let's be real, most people go to yoga because something's not working in their life.
Yeah.
It's very rarely that somebody's like, everything's so perfect. Oh my God, you know what I need? Yoga. It's typically I need to try something. Something's not happening the way I want it to happen. So take action, try it on. And there's over the 250 plus styles of yoga. So if you go one time and it's weird, which look, I'm so grateful that my first yoga class was a Baptiste yoga class. Like it was because it was not that Baptiste yoga is the right yoga or anything like that, because I've also been trained subsequently in a lot of other different styles of yoga. But it was my first class. It was essential language. It was kind of militant enough. It had enough structure where it felt accessible to me. Yeah. And then so because that was my first class, I was like, this is good. I'll do it again. But if my first class, no offense here, was a Kundalini class, I'd have been like, you people are crazy. Yeah. Right? Like I would have been like, no, this isn't for me. But today I can go to the Kundalini class, Anusara class, Jivamukti. I can do any and all of it and get what was intended. But so if you don't like the first class, try another style. You'll find one that vibes with you. And just taking the mindful movement is what's going to make a difference.
There you go.
No matter who you are.
Love it, brother. Wow. Well, I'll tell you, we're coming up on an hour. I don't know what your schedule looks like, Dan. If you want to roll a little bit longer, man, I'm loving this conversation.
Me too.
Will, you good? Let's keep rolling, dude.
All right.
Awesome. I'm on until Dan gets tired of talking, which
yeah, coffee.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, so you guys are both yoga practitioners and yoga teachers, and I've done yoga maybe, I don't know, in my life, probably gone to 30 sessions. And I've had, and Dan, I shared this with you on the phone last month. I've had an experience that probably not as powerful as the lightning coming up through your body, but I've had an experience where I was very emotional after a practice, like crying. And I felt embarrassed about it. I was like, what the hell? I'm crying because I just did something physical. I must have tapped into, and this again, I'm going back to the way that I was thinking prior to. I was like, I must have tapped into some feminine part of my body that's weakness. So I'll never do that again. I have since then done yoga again, but for someone like me, who is a dabbler, maybe once every few months I'll go and do a yoga session. Outside of your story, which is incredibly powerful, and that in and of itself has probably got me enough motivation. And I see a lot of chat on the side here with people saying that what you've shared with them has got them inspired to try it. But aside from the story, what would you tell someone that is dabbling or has a curious, I think Will and I talked about being a curious yoga practitioner. What would you tell someone?
Yeah. Well, I'd say, well, stay curious, right? So it's maybe showing there's a lot of hurdles in the way for people to like, okay, I'm going to become a regular practitioner of yoga. Well, one, if you want to go to a studio, it's not cheap. So there's like access, right? And so there's a lot of organizations working on access for people, a lot in the veteran community and people of color and people like in underserved neighborhood. Like there's a lot of access being created, but then there's still like, okay, well, what clothes do I wear? There's so many things that run through their head. And so what I'd say to people is like, okay, there's tons of free resources you can do right at home. Just pull it up on YouTube. Just do it. And here's what I would say don't do. Don't do the 10-minute yoga flow to start your day. 10 minutes of like movement is just like, well, I was about to make a sexual innuendo. No, so I'll just say, take an hour-long class. Just keep putting, and if you have to stop, but stay in it for like the hour. If you have to come out, go back in, come out, go back in. But be committed, because that's really an hour that you're dedicating to self-growth, right? You're dedicating, you're going to say, I'm going to do this thing, whether if I have to quit and take a break or pause or whatever it is or not, or maybe I'm a little confused about what's happening. Perfect. But you're doing it. You are taking disciplined action to serve you. And like, that's what matters. And if you can develop a meditation practice, even better. And a lot of people confuse yoga or they look at yoga one-dimensionally, like the third limb of yoga. It's just asana, right? So like, it's just showing up on a mat and doing poses and, and that's what yoga is. It's actually much bigger than that, and including meditation, right? So concentration, meditation, and that's really the goal. Like, depending on how you interpret the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, how you interpret the 8 limbs, what I get to in my self-study is the reason yoga asana exists is to prepare my body to be able to sit still longer, right? Because that's really where the magic happens. And that's really when you get to know and get connected to who you really are underneath all the layers of BS that we've put on ourselves about what clothes I have to wear or what attitude I bring or what feminine energy is being unlocked that I don't want to be seen experiencing, right? And then you get to actually have peace with there's nothing bad or wrong about feeling a different way.
Yeah.
And the more time, at least for me, the more time I spent like acknowledging those parts of myself, the more it is I can manage those parts of myself. Yeah. The more it is I'm aware, the more practice I have sitting in conscious awareness, the more aware I am of like when I'm beginning to get stressed out. And so I don't want to be stressed out. Now I know to put in the tools of pranayama, fix my posture, sit upright, put the mechanisms of my body to work to support my health and well-being. And so the more I practice that, the better operator I am. Leading a SEAL team, right? Like, hey, yeah, we're just not going to go to the range for a couple months and just go to combat. You fucking kidding me? No, you're going to be efficient in your weapon system, and you're going to be, yeah, we're going to spend time in the water. We're going to spend time doing this because we're training for like real life.
Right.
It's the same thing. I move my body and sit still to prepare myself to live my life the best possible way I can. And yoga is not the only way, but it's a really great way.
Wow. Thanks, Dan. Let me ask you this, and I think this is a question, for everyone out there as well, that is suffering with some sort of emotional, whatever, like trauma, stress, anxiety, going through all that you went through, all the, with your legs and all that emotional heartache and just how, with your journey through yoga, how has it helped you to cope with that? Come to terms with it, and also, but seemingly transform it into where you are today. So can you just get into that, how the practice of not just the physical practice of yoga, which I'm sure has helped, but also the meditation stuff too. And then what was were there kind of stages that you noticed oh, that's gone. And then now this coming up, and then, oh, I burned through that because of my practices. So I would love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I speak about yoga, mindfulness, meditation, it's really all the same practice, right? So there's a lot of different avenues, a lot of different techniques or practices inside of that. It's the realm of really is ultimately the best self-care that at least I can think of doing. But for me, it started with, and I think it's sort of the overarching theme of all these practices for me. I don't want to oversimplify it because there were some like breakthrough moments when I realized, well, the reason I don't want to be in a relationship is because my mom left when I was 13. So
Wow.
there's like a lot of those sort of like aha moments along the way. But the real overarching theme is it helped me be aware of how I was being or doing moment to moment throughout the day. So it's like, okay, well, I'm nervous. I have this big speech I have to perform. When I'm really nervous, well, nervous isn't going to serve me. So then I can act on sort of calming my nerves versus just being nervous and showing up. And the same thing with like anger or when I'm feeling jealous or when I'm feeling any sort of emotion that could be, kind of framed as negative is like I see it. It's like I have like a 30,000-foot view. The more I practice these techniques, the more of a bigger vision or view I have of my own life moment to moment. And so I can notice when something is about to go sideways and fix it before it ever becomes a problem. So there's so much less sliding out of control in my life. It's sort of able to bring everything back onto what I talked about my wrist, like living versus just being alive.
Yeah.
Like I can so much more easily and without drama and without hard work, just pull things back in the center and say, well, this is the right call. And not, there's one of the best, it's a book I recommend to everyone, especially if they're sort of like considering, some self-work, yoga, meditation. The Four Agreements by Don McGovern.
Great.
It's a tiny little book.
Yeah.
Big. You can read it in a couple hours, and it's like the best thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
Don't take anything personally, right? So like it's those. It's sort of it's easy to live in those agreements. If as I've developed these practices, and so with passing time, yeah, there were some aha moments along the way, but it's just being better and better and better at living a life kind of on the path that I want it to be on.
Wow. Yeah. So really I would imagine, Dan, like, having such a traumatic experience, it would be so easy to slide into depression, so easy to go into victimhood, so easy to, just almost want to check out of life because it's like you've been just dealt. I mean, that's the thing, you are seemingly dealt a really bad hand, but here you are, right, using the powerful practices of, yoga and meditation and mindfulness and pranayama to actually rescue yourself and create a new story, right?
Yeah.
Of yourself. Like someone mentioned here, it's like in our feed about like, you taking control and writing your own story. And here you are, like you're a public speaker, you're doing all these great things in order, you're a teacher, an advocate of all of these practices to help people live better lives. So I just want to bring that into play. That's really wonderful.
Yeah. Actually, I sometimes even forget that I don't have legs. Really, I don't. Like, I'm like, oh shit. Oh, I'm like, wait, I can't jump that. Like I'm like, I can catch myself because I still like have that. Oh, I can do anything. I'm like, well, I just maybe not that. I just do it differently, right? But it is. It's such. Like I'm so grateful. Like I'm left in the experience of gratitude, most of all that I. Well, one, that the practices exist, that we have access to these tools that work, and that someone didn't give up on me, right? And sort of like was an invitation. Like that's why I always say invite a veteran to yoga because it just might save their life. And then you can substitute veteran for a firefighter, first responder, cop, teacher, like right.
We have a bunch of people on here. We have a bunch of cops and firefighters on here that are talking about bringing these practices to the first responders.
Absolutely.
And also, it's one guy here, Jamie, is saying I'm a firefighter. I'm glad my introduction was Baptiste level 1 and 2 were awesome.
Yeah.
And I can't recommend yoga for first responders programs enough. So I just wanted to put that out there because that's exactly what you're talking about here. Very well.
Absolutely. And that's the point is, no matter who you are, where you come from, what story you have about your life, these practices work. We've been doing it for over 5,000 years, probably much longer than that, right? And so there's something to it. Like why fitness fads come and go, and there's always the new thing, but these practices we've been doing as human beings forever. And it's funny, we talked earlier about how it's like in the United States and in the West, we see it as what's feminine. But that's not the origin story of yoga. It's very, very, very masculine. Yeah. And sort of perpetuated. It's like Ujjayi pranayama, that type of victorious breath, the type of breathing that we a lot of times practice in yoga asana practice, is the breath to like endure physical hardship longer. Like it's like the breath of endurance. The breath,
victorious breath, right? Victorious breath.
That's it, right? And like that is when you talk from like an energetic perspective, that is very masculine energy. Right? And so when you could be a woman channeling masculine energy, you can be a man channeling masculine energy. And there's concept of surrender is feminine energy. You could be a man and learn to, not learn to surrender. Everybody has it in them, but you can embrace the quality of surrender, and then have nothing to do with your gender. Just the fact that that's the sort of energetic level of the quality of surrender. And so I think I wouldn't have even understood that concept without meditation, without allowing it the space, and like being able to see, being able to see that like it doesn't mean anything, right? To cry after a yoga practice, I'm like, well, to me, like if that first happened to me, which it did, that particular moment was very powerful. So it sort of overrode everything. But there's been other moments too where I'm like in the back, like I don't want anybody to see this, like pulling back the tears. But now I'm like so grateful because those were tears that weren't shed at the moment they should have been.
Right. Yeah.
Right? That's been stuck in my body somewhere, holding on to some old memory, and now I was able to let it go.
Right.
Release.
And that's great. That's to talk about. Yeah, it's exactly it. And I think people don't understand that is like, stress is energy. And I like to really break down emotions as like emotions, energy and motion. And if it's not moving through you, it's getting stuck in our house, right? In this car, that we drive around all the time, right? And we don't take care of the car, kick the tires, change the oil, make it all shiny on the inside and outside, right? Stuff starts to break down. And a lot of those breakdowns happen because we, instead of releasing, that stress, energy, whatever that is, we hold on to it. And this is why, in like you talked about, John and Dan, and I've had the same experience, you have this emotional release in your practice. Like I'm sure, Dan, you hear, a lot of people in half pigeon. That is a lot of people because we store so much in our shoulders for men, typically chest, women a lot in their pelvis and their hips. And the practice is an amazing way to release that stress energy. And that's why I've seen so many, people come out of the practice. And in New York, when I first started practicing, I heard the term yoga brain. You walk around like you're high, like you come out of practice like you're because you've released all this a lot of this physical and emotional stress that's in your body. You using the pranayama, the breathing practices within the practice itself to kind of shift us into higher states of being and higher states of energy, and we just naturally feel better. And it's like I just wanted to put that out there for people because it's not just like, oh, I'm just going to get stronger and more flexible. There's a whole emotional content and mental and content that begins to deconstruct or unwind that makes us feel just so much better. And then we're not also carrying around that baggage anymore, or it's not as heavy, at least, So absolutely. I just wanted to mention that because I feel, it's not just a physical practice. I mean, it's a physical practice. Get into the doorways of deeper into the soul, deeper into the mind, deeper into our emotional life. And that's just going to start healing, not just ourselves, but it'll just trickle out and help us to heal our relationships in all aspects of our lives in a lot of ways. So
Amen. And it's true. Like what you said is 100% true. And it makes me think back to like, okay, what do you say to somebody who's kind of on the fence or like wants to do it or not do it? Because sometimes like, oh yeah. Okay, emotional health. Okay, yeah. Right? I'm fine. Like things are fine. Yeah, what? No, they're not. They're not. They're not fine. I got it. You're status quo, right? Got it. And so you're not dying, right? And like things are working, but maybe not optimally. Here's the bottom line. From like being willing to step in and try it, I've never met a single human being of thousands and thousands of people who are first-time yoga practitioners, like in different classes. I've never met a single one that didn't leave yoga not feeling better than when they walked in.
Yeah.
100% success rate on feeling better when they left, no matter who they are, right? No matter their story, their circumstance. Never met somebody who left yoga and like, well, that was shit.
Now I'm depressed. It's like it doesn't happen.
Right. Other than me, my first lesson.
I was going to say.
Other than me.
Hey, that actually, I want to ask a question. So the woman that introduced you to yoga, put you through those 3 sessions, and apparently introduced you to meditation.
Yeah.
Where is she in your life now? And what does she think about where you are in your life now?
That's a question I wish you didn't ask, because she, oh man, maybe she's listening to this, maybe not. She got into a really, what I would call a toxic relationship, and then we're not allowed to be friends anymore.
Oh, all right. Well,
as far as I know, she doesn't teach yoga anymore. One of the most powerful teachers I've ever witnessed in my life. Just, life.
Yeah, life.
Her,
life.
How happy I hope she's happy and content living her best possible life. And there's a whole nother story behind that too. That's pretty. That I could really make the guy get a hate following. But I'll just.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, man. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna go sign up for yoga this weekend, man.
Yes.
I'm not even kidding. I'm gonna find a way to get it done. If it's nothing else besides watching an hour long and participating in an hour long YouTube session, and then growing from there. I mean, that's how I started with meditation, was with an app. So why not start yoga with something like that? So.
And I think, I want to say also, it's not about, I think where men got a lot of get trapped, Dan and John, right, is about that you mentioned earlier about being good. It's like, if I'm not good at it, like, why am I going to do it? And also it comes up for men very often, and women, I'm sure, but men definitely. I mean, I'm a man, so I'm speaking from a man. It's like that competitive nature. It's like, oh, I need to be better than other people in the classroom, and these are some of the obstacles that I've seen, many, many times. And I heard it. I teach this class on Insight Timer, and I have friends on Instagram that are, or people that I've met through Instagram or have come through Instagram, from Insight Timer. And, she mentions like, oh, my guy friend doesn't want to do yoga because he's afraid he's not going to be good at it. Right. And it's like, and if you just want to talk on that a little bit, Dan.
Yeah. Get over it. Right. I mean, that's like the guy in me is like, just get over it. And that's where the learning is. Right. And so it's when you notice you're getting frustrated because it's not going right, and then staying anyway. Like the power that comes from that sort of moment, right? And you're actually like negotiating with yourself, right? I want to quit, I want to run, I want to escape, fight or flight kicks in because you're like, I look like a fool, I'm in a yoga class, my shorts are too tight, I think my nut fell out the one time, right? How many times does that happen? Right? And like, sorry, that was maybe rude, I don't know. But that happens for a dude. Right? But then staying anyway, as you're like talking yourself out of it, and you're staying anyway.
Yeah.
Right. The byproduct of that is just increased confidence and increased resilience.
There you go.
And then ultimately getting it, and then you find it. So many times when I was sort of discovering poses, and I'm like in physical pain. I'm on my knee. My patella is getting shifted in a way that doesn't work right. And I'm really trying to find the pose and I want to quit. And I'm so frustrated. And there's physical pain and mental anguish, like self-inflicted. And then it's just like, boom. And it sort of just opens up and it's like,
Oh,
oh, and this wave of ease passes over you and
yeah.
the endorphins start tingling everywhere. And you're like, yeah, like that, I got it.
Yeah.
And that's like, it's like playing around the golf and you're terrible at it. And then you hit that one perfect shot and the ball goes far and perfect and beautiful. That feeling is like accessible all the time in a yoga practice.
Wow. Yeah. And it's also a metaphor of life in some ways. Like if you're struggling in a physical practice of yoga and like dealing with yourself, mentally and emotionally because you're not, good at doing something, like that's showing up in your work. It's showing up in your relationships. It's showing up in everywhere else. And so you can use, and I talk about this when I teach, it's like using the practice of yoga as a metaphor for life. Like how you do anything is how you do everything. If you're struggling here, right, you're going to struggle over there. And but it's very less threatening and much more less embarrassing, I think, in some ways, to struggle on your yoga mat with yourself internally, with nobody seeing that struggle, or instead of taking it into the office or out in some other form. And so, that's been a big, big bonus, and another, I think, a giant, maybe inspirational point for people to take on yoga, because you're going to face yourself time and time and time again. Like balancing poses, like, it seems like it should be pretty easy to balance in a tree pose,
Right.
like asana, but it's just like when you're touching the wall and you're falling over, it's like, those are like the best moments in practice because you eat your humble pie.
Yeah.
And, it might not taste good in the beginning, but it's so sweet later on when you understand the lesson that's in that humble pie.
Exactly. And then when you think you got it, okay, now close your eyes.
Yeah,
You get to level up again. You're like, oh man, just when I think I got it, it gets harder. Right?
Yeah, exactly. You can always, again, at yoga, you can always take it up another notch. It's not just
Exactly. And
right?
you can take it down a notch.
Yeah, big
It's
time.
what's needed, right? Like check in with where you're at and then do it. And to your point, I call the yoga mat a petri dish for life. Right? Like, right? When you have what your experience here, like when you want to quit a pose, like where else are you quitting? Like what relationship are you quitting? What confrontation are you avoiding that needs to be confronted, right? And like that's it all happens like just like you said, Will, right there in your mat, and then you can draw those parallels to your whole life.
Yeah,
everything out from that yoga mat like a giant coronavirus. Too soon? It's too soon.
Unapologetic, baby.
Exactly.
I gotta tell you, Dan. I don't even know if you know this, but you and I are actually going to be both at a golf tournament together in August. Sharon Schreiber. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And she's watching right now. She
All
commented.
right.
Yeah. So, and the fact that you mentioned, the getting out on the golf course and sucking and starting to beat yourself up. That's where I'm at with golf.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I'm at with a lot of things. But you're right. Having to just get over it and put yourself out there. And then by being in that uncomfortable position, pushing yourself through that, it does develop that resilience and that grit, and it helps you in other aspects in your life. Like Will said, the way you do anything in life is, I'm going to screw it up.
Yeah,
Will, say it again.
How you do anything is how you do everything.
There you go.
I learned that in yoga class.
So,
well,
awesome.
Should we? Do you want to? Should we close this out, John?
Let's close it out, man. Let's. Why don't we read the winners of the contest? We had a drawing for 1 month free supply of Halo Sport on the go, and Will's got those names, so we'll go through those and then we'll figure out how to get those to those listeners. And then Dan, if you're comfortable doing it, man, just run us through a final grounding practice and we'll wrap up the show.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay, great. So here are 3 winners, and thank you for putting your email on our email list. And if anyone just wants to join our email list, head to mentalkingmindfulness.com and enter your email list. We're also going to do this giveaway again next week. Yes, with Courtney. right? Courtney Boyer, is that right?
Yeah.
Mindfulness Sex, where she's coming to us next
Mindfulness
week.
and sex.
Mindfulness and sex next week. Dan, I hope you're tuning in.
We're talking about sex on LinkedIn. That is taboo, man.
Wow, that is cool.
So here are those winners of a month's supply of Halo Sport hydrating powder stick. Nicole Heyman, right? And then I have a couple email. Then I have AST6068 at hotmail.com. There's no name here, John. I'm trying.
We'll figure that out. Maybe that's just how. Maybe that is their name.
Right? That's all I got right here. And the third one is Lou Schaefer. So I'm going to contact you guys through email. Thank you for participating and signing up for this giveaway. And we'll find a way to get you this product through Halo Sport. And thanks again, Halo Sport, for sponsoring Men Talking Mindfulness. Dan?
Hey, Dan, actually, sorry, man. I'm gonna interrupt real quick before you do your ground practice, man. Hey, how can people find you?
Yes.
Find out what you're doing, and is there anything that we can promote for you? I promoted your website a couple of times, but what else you got going on that we can plug for you?
No, that's it. So dannevins.com to see. Well, I got to be better at my calendar. This COVID has sort of taken me out of like telling people where I'm going, what I'm doing. And though now that things are getting back to closer to what we call normal, updated a lot more public events happening. There's a lot of private ones that are just like, for XYZ corporation or company.
Sure.
Yeah. So dannevins.com, Instagram, Dan Nevins, Facebook, Dan Nevins, LinkedIn, Dan Nevins. And
that's exactly what the picture looks like, dude.
Hand, just like the head's cut off.
Awesome, brother.
Blue shirt.
Well,
take
it away, man.
All right. Grounding practice. I'd love to close this out. So if everyone can take a comfortable seat, sort of the balance of attention and ease in your posture. Lengthen your spine, pull your shoulders back, drop your palms into your lap, close your eyes. Just notice your breath. And then add the quality of intention to your breath, a deep, full breath in. Full, complete exhale, whether it's through your nose, your mouth, whatever's the most comfortable for you. One more deep, full breath in. And full, complete breath out. And just notice your feet. And even in my situation, I don't have feet, but I can still notice my feet. Then move your awareness with your next inhale up from your feet to your ankles. And with your next inhale, move your awareness up from your ankles to your knees. Bring all of your attention to both knees. And gratitude for how they perform for you, the function of your knee, the quality of your knees, mobility granted to you because of your knees. And then move your awareness from your knees to your pelvis, your center of gravity anchored down through whatever you're sitting on into the planet that connects all of us. Notice your place on the earth. And then all of us, connected now through technology and physically connected. Our very core of our being down from our seat into the earth. And then pull that energy up with your next inhale to your low back, your lumbar spine. Invite the curve into your lumbar spine. And then with your next breath, lift your awareness up through your solar plexus. Your next inhale, move that awareness up your spine line to the place and space behind your heart. Notice your breath and allow your breath to circle energetically around that space behind your heart. With your next inhale, just move all of your awareness and attention up into the space inside your head. With your eyes closed, just see what you see, feel what you feel. And just for a moment, considering the state of the world and the separation and lockdowns, the lack of the ability to travel for a lot of people, I want to do an exercise with you. I want you just to visualize, imagine a person that you just wish you could be with right now. Whether they're still here or gone, just see their face. Imagine them seated somewhere familiar or not. And then from that space behind your heart, reach out to just be with that person. And allow your eyes to meet theirs. And as their eyes meet yours, without saying anything, just offer these words to them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you be free. Free from pain, free from suffering, free. And now see them turn to you, their eyes meet yours as they offer these words to you. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you be free. Take a deep breath in, fill up. Exhale, empty. And then open your eyes.
Got me all welled up there, Dan.
Beautiful, man. Love the loving kindness
It.
meditation. And man, how appropriate for the end of the show. And for the audience, we kind of sprung that on Dan, and he crushed it. So a natural born leader, man. So thank you so much, Dan, for being with us today, brother. It's been phenomenal. I know Will and I appreciate you, and on top of that, I know the audience is going to get a lot from this, both those who are here with us live and with the podcast later. If you got any last words, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll wrap it up with our little outro. And then if you will, just hang tight after the outro, and we'll chat with you for a second.
Got it. Perfect.
Cool.
Any last words? It's just this. Invite a veteran to yoga. You just might save their life.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right.
Thanks,
Dan.
Will. Thank you. Everyone's thanking everyone in the feed.
Yeah, see you.
Beautiful. Thanks for everyone being on the
Thanks for joining Will and John on Men Talking Mindfulness. If you enjoyed the show, please like and share it with your friends and family, and please, we would appreciate a review too. Until next time, this has been Men Talking Mindfulness. Thanks for showing up.